Well, believe it or not, guys, this episode did not entirely suck. It had some moments that sucked, but some moments that didn't. She-Hulk episode 8. Let's conversationalize. Alright, guys, so the last... I can't even remember at this point. The last 5,000 episodes were pointless. Episode 5, she got a suit and they teased Daredevil. They got a suit that they didn't even show us then. Episode 6 was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. The most fillery wedding episode ever. Episode 7, The Retreat, was her going to a meditation resort, talking to a bunch of weirdos. No-name comic book villains who nobody has ever heard of. But lo and behold, the writers and producers and directors are capable of writing stuff and making stuff that has stuff happening. Daredevil is here. Yes! Oh my gosh, it only took us like 5 billion years, just a shade under a decade. Whew. So yeah, Daredevil has finally arrived. And I just kind of want to get right into it. Starts off with Leapfrog. He's a character from the comics. He actually exists in the comic books. Somebody had the idea to create a character and name him Leapfrog. I don't know whether I was supposed to be learning my ABCs or watching a supervillain do evil things. Leapfrog. We have to wonder to ourselves what place we are at as a society in our culture to where we can allow such harebrained stupidity to infiltrate our television. But yes, he is real, Leapfrog. Anyway, and his catchphrase is, "Ribbit and rip it." Some of you might be wondering why I have lightsabers on my table, even in my She-Hulk reviews. It is for the sole purpose of doing this. Wow. And I get, yes, it's purposefully dumb. They know it's dumb. But to a certain extent, something can become so dumb that even though the content creators know it's dumb, the stupidity of whatever content that specifically is saturates everything inside of it, making even the fact that they thought it was dumb to put it in there seem dumb in the first place. I don't know if you guys understood any of that. I'm not sure I did, but the bottom line is, it's stupid. Moving on to the stuff we actually care about. I swear, for the first 5 minutes of this episode, I'm like, is this what we're going to be dealing with? Leapfrog guy, still no Daredevil, and praise the Lord, we have Daredevil. Leapfrog goes to Jennifer Walters about a court case. He's trying to sue Luke Jacobson, the fashion designer who designed Jen's She-Hulk / Jen clothes, as well as her superhero outfit. He's trying to sue him, who also made his Leapfrog outfit, because his Leapfrog outfit caught on fire, even though it wasn't supposed to, when he was trying to stop a crime, a grand theft television robbery. So Jen Walters doesn't want to defend this guy because he doesn't want to be against Luke Jacobson, because she wants Luke Jacobson to keep designing clothes for her. So she tries to settle it with him before it comes to a court case, but Jacobson, of course, is mad at her for even suggesting that he would make something faulty, that he would go against what he said, because apparently the Leapfrog suit was supposed to be fireproof, and it It's not fireproof. I don't care, but Daredevil, here we go. They have the court case. Jen is defending Leapfrog. Luke Jacobson at first looks like he doesn't have an attorney yet, and the judge is like, where's your attorney? Are you defending yourself? And Luke Jacobson's like, of course not. And then sure enough, we finally get Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock walking in the courtroom. Saving grace. This show needed it. It was necessary to have Daredevil come in at this point. Because, wow, we were on such a rocky road. I mean, it was full on darkness, no parents, and it didn't make it better. Garbage. Anyway, light at the end of the tunnel. Matt Murdock walks in. And of course, the first thing I'm thinking is, do not mess this up. Don't mess this up. Because I finished season 1 of the Daredevil series, and I started season 2 recently. It is still one of the most phenomenal shows ever. It is awesome. I love it. So when you take this character that I'm really falling in love with, and I'm like, oh man, Daredevil, he's really cool, he's awesome. I'm like, don't mess this up, Marvel. And there are a few things that they do that really annoy me, but there were also some things that they did. It was like, oh, there we go. So I know the question on everyone's mind is, did they comedicize him? Did he not blend well? Did his character not blend well with the comedic tones of the show when his show is so serious? I think for the most part, they found a way to do it to where it was not total heresy and total blasphemy to the character of Daredevil. I think they were able to find a happy medium to where it still fit, for the most part, within his personality to have a few jokes be cracked here and there, but at the end of the day, still, like, okay, for the most part, he is Daredevil. But again, there's some few things that he does that's like, that's not Daredevil. We'll get to that later. But Matt Murdock walks in the court case, and the other thought I had was, oh, She-Hulk's gone. There's no way she's winning a court case against Matt Murdock. And I was right. In fact, he absolutely destroys her in the legal sense. She's trying to push for Luke Jacobson to reveal his former clients so she can see if there have been any faulty wiring, I guess, with their costumes and the equipment that Luke Jacobson has provided them previously. And at first you would think, like, okay, that makes sense because you need to know if this has happened before, if the whole, like, offering you an item that you made but is not what you said it was, if this has happened before, they need to know that. But then Matt Murdock, and they actually wrote this scene well. I think, at least. I think they managed to actually write it well. This is by far the best courtroom thing we've gotten so far. And it's over like that. Probably why it's the best courtroom thing we've gotten so far on the show. So Matt Murdock explains that it would not be good for Luke Jacobson to reveal his former clients because superheroes need to have privacy, or some superheroes choose to have privacy. They even have this whole debate, like She-Hulk is like, well, you know, superheroes these days are public figures. And it is revealed by Matt Murdock himself. He says to the judge, he's like, may I remind you that the Sokovia Accords have been repealed? Which is finally an answer. It's actually kind of funny. It's very much a line in passing, but at the same time, it's like, whoa, that's awesome. They finally revealed it, because ever since Civil War, I mean, maybe they were mentioned a few times here and there, but not a ton. And it was always just like, okay, Civil War had such big ramifications. There were Sokovia Accords that were going to limit superheroes, and superheroes didn't seem that limited later. I mean, Captain America and his posse were still on the run, but other than that, it was like, did the Accords really ever matter at all after Civil War? And now finally we just realized, okay, they repealed them. Now, when this took place, I would assume right after Endgame, or right after the end of Endgame, when everybody came back, because clearly in the time of Infinity War, General Ross was still running that whole operation. He was still, making sure the superheroes didn't do anything out of line with what the government wanted them to do. So clearly the Sokovia Accords were still in place. And because Captain America, like I said, was still on the run with his posse. But I would assume everything that happened with Thanos and the snap and the 5-year decimation, the blip, I would assume that means that everybody just kind of realized how stupid the Sokovia Accords were, that we just need superheroes to do what superheroes need to do, and we don't need to limit them in any way. So that's probably why they got repealed. But that is a major piece of information that, we should pay attention to. But yes, Jen makes the debate that most superheroes are public, but then Matt Murdock counters that with the fact that even though Jen Walters, as She-Hulk, chose to make her secret identity public, there are plenty of other superheroes out there who don't want that to happen. Which is interesting when you think about it, because if there are really at this point that many super people who are good guys and have worked with Luke Jacobson to get their costumes, like, what kind of super people are we talking about? I doubt the X-Men. Maybe the Fantastic Four. Even when she mentioned a lot of superheroes are public these days, I had the thought to myself, the fact that the Fantastic Four are very public superheroes. They're in the limelight a lot. Everybody knows who they are. They're not hiding anything. Everybody knows they live in the Baxter Building. Very public superheroes. No secret anythings, really. So that did make me wonder if the Fantastic Four are not already in play in the MCU. Maybe not like as in the limelight, because we haven't heard about them yet, but somewhat in the limelight, at least enough to garner recognition in the sense that, hey, there's some public superheroes. I don't know. Just theorizing at this point. But Matt Murdock makes a very good counter against Jen's statement, and then he uses his super senses to... He can smell the kind of fuel that Leapfrog used in his costume, because Leapfrog brought his costume with him like an idiot. And Matt asks him what kind of fuel he used, and he's like, oh, I use jet fuel. And then Luke Jacobson's like, I told you not to use jet fuel. Like, I gave explicit instructions not to use jet fuel. And then, of course, She-Hulk didn't know that. So she's like, what, are you serious? To the Leapfrog guy. And then the judge is like, yeah, if you ignored these explicit instructions, then there really is no court case here. So Matt Murdock wins by a landslide. He even just goes ahead and closes his book. I just love that. He, before the judge even finished speaking, he was just like, okay, we're done here. So I did like that. I did like that they held up to his intelligence. It was very much like him from the show. Like, he spoke with intelligence. He had a presence. It was like the blind guy, the blind lawyer, just absolutely owning the opposition. So I loved that. Moving on. We find Jen at a bar later, after the court case has been lost. Matt Murdock is there. He buys her a drink. And this is the part where I'm kind of like, not Daredevil, because I do not buy into their romance at all. Not even a little bit. It's weird to me. The character you see in the show, in the Daredevil series, has some comedic moments here and there, mostly serious, but he's not looking to just hang out with the closest girl he finds. And it's just weird to me that he would just have this, this lawyer that he was opposing in this one court case who happens to be a superhero, that he has absolutely nothing in common with. Maybe some snarkiness. I guess. Maybe some snarkiness in their personalities. Maybe that is in common. And the fact that they're lawyers. But other than that, I don't think they have a ton in common. It's just weird to me that he would all of a sudden develop this random affection for She-Hulk, who, other than I guess she's attractive when she's She-Hulk, I don't see any parts of her personality or there's not a lot of stuff there that I would be like, hey, that's something that a serious lawyer guy with some slight comedic moments here and there might notice at a few points. So I don't know. I just don't buy into their romance very much. Anyway, he buys her a drink and they have a chat. And this leads to a very interesting discussion. One that made me think, oh, are they doing it? Are they actually doing what I wanted them to do from episode 1? Because in episode 1, it was even in the previously on segment in this episode. In episode 1, like I've mentioned many times, Hulk explains to She-Hulk, like regular Hulk explains to She-Hulk, that when you have these powers, being a superhero is just gonna kind of come to you. It's just gonna find you. But you have to know how to control your powers, which comes up later. And you just need to realize that you can't always just be Jen the lawyer. Like, at this point, you have powers now, which means you have a responsibility to do things that other people can't do for the people in need. And they're actually coming back on this. Matt Murdock gives her the rundown of, like, he talks about his law firm in Hell's Kitchen in New York, but that leads to him discussing with her. He's like, you know, because he's Daredevil, but she doesn't know that at this point. He's like, you know, you could be helping people who have been failed by society in the law as a lawyer, but you could also be helping people who have been failed by the law as She-Hulk. So he's essentially saying you can be a lawyer and a superhero at the same time. It works great, because that's what he does. And she's all like, well, I work for these people so much, I don't think I can handle anything else. But he's like, I think you can. And she seems to resonate with that, which I thought was very interesting. I was like, hey, we might be heading on down the path of redemption here. She might actually be willing to realize that maybe she was a little too arrogant before, and maybe she was a little too like, oh, I don't need to be a superhero, and I don't need to control these powers. We might be heading down the path of some, reflection. So I am excited for that. I think they might continue that later. One of the inherent problems, though, is they should have done that like 5 episodes ago. Or at least started it. But now we're just like starting it, and we're the second to last episode. There was no lead up throughout this entire season. It was just her doing one dumb thing, another dumb thing, another dumb thing, another dumb thing, until we get to Daredevil, until we get to discovering that you could be a superhero, until we get to the Intelligentsia. That's not good. That's not good character development. That's not good storytelling. It's just not good. Moving on. We did have a good scene there with Matt Murdock. I appreciated it. He still remained intelligent. Great. She gets a text from, I believe his name is Todd Phelps. The nerdy, too curious for his own good guy who she dated at one point earlier in the show. I believe it was in episode 4 when she went on all those different dates. And he was the guy who was all curious about, like, how much can you lift? And he wanted to know all this information about her. And he came up in another episode, too. He came back in episode 5. And at this point, I'm fully expecting him to be connected to the Intelligentsia. Because he appears at the gala later in the episode, at the end of the episode. And I swear to you people, if we get to the finale and he's the leader of the Intelligentsia, this was all his idea, I might hurt someone. I mean, for real. Now, granted, if he is revealed to be some sort of character from the comics that we just weren't aware that he is that character from the comics, I might be like, okay, that's interesting. But if he is just this random guy that they created to be the leader of this whatever conspiracy dark gang, again, bottom line, if it's not the leader, complete, utter, wasted opportunity. Leader's going to be the villain of Captain America New World Order. They should connect him via this show because it makes sense, because she's She-Hulk, and Bruce Banner Hulk has had several run-ins with the leader in the comics. He's like his arch nemesis in the comics other than Abomination. Wasted opportunity if they don't do it. I'm really hoping that's not the case. Also, if they make him the leader, it's just going to be insanely obvious. It's like he's all curious about her powers and what she can do, and he's also into this other stuff. Like, when she goes to meet him, because he says he needs her help with this legal case, because he bought a Wakandan spear at an auction, which I don't think is a coincidence. They probably deliberately put that in there because they knew Wakanda Forever will be coming out soon after. New trailer dropped the other day, by the way. He's clearly into all this superhero stuff. And what's also funny is that he says, like, oh, I love Wakanda. I've studied abroad there. Which is kind of funny. It's like, I knew Wakanda was open to the world. I didn't know it was that open. Like you could just go visit and then just study all the stuff there. I didn't realize it was so accessible. I don't know if the writers necessarily thought that line through exactly when they wrote it, but I guess sure, we'll give it a pass. It's possible. Bottom line is there was one scene in this scene that made me laugh. It was when he was talking about how he bought it, and then he said, "I got it for $1 million." And then she just has this long pause, this awkward silence, and then he's like, "A million." She's still on long pause. And he's like, "Dollars." And she's like, "I got it." I genuinely laughed hard at that scene because it's like, all the new abbreviations these days and shortening words. And like, if you think that saying $1 million is too hard and you just say $1 million, something that means that something's wrong with you. And I'm glad they at least kind of pointed that out in this show when she's like, "You really did not just say that, did you?" Shows how weird he is. But I did think that was funny. Anyway, she leaves. She gets out of there as soon as possible. Plops down on the couch when she gets home. Then she gets a call from stupid frog guy saying, "I'm being attacked. Come help me." And so she goes to the door, but she stops at the door and then looks at her closet. And I was like, "Hey, are we getting a superhero suit?" And yes, superhero suit. And I was like, yes! You had the moment where she stopped. She looked back. You kind of knew what she was about to do. She did the thing, and it was like, okay, it was like good execution. I felt like that was a cool way to do it. But again, it should have happened earlier in the series. She goes, stops the car as Leapfrog's driving inside of it, and sure enough, Daredevil jumps from atop of the car onto the road in his red and gold glory. And he's all like, "Back off. You don't know what's going on here." And so she just attacks him because she thinks he's the bad guy, which she makes a point later, like, "Well, you are dressed as a devil, so I thought you were the bad guy." Which, I mean, I guess makes sense. But here's the thing. This fight isn't a fight. I can understand him running away, not because he's running away from her, but because he's trying to get Leapfrog because he's escaping. So I can understand him running away in that sense. But just, if they were going to make a She-Hulk versus Daredevil, it could have been way better. Like her, smacking him into the car and just ripping his mask off. I'm like, really? I feel like the Daredevil from the show would have been way more formidable than just, "Oh, I got hit in a car and now my mask is off." Like, really? That was the best thing you had planned for that whole encounter? Then, once Jen figures out that he's Matt Murdock, she takes his mask off. She's like, "Why are you attacking my client?" And he says, "Because Leapfrog captured Luke Jacobson." And I will say, you told me 2 years ago, hey, there'd be a live action show and She-Hulk and Daredevil would team up. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds awesome. But I'm not nearly as excited as I would have been then, because this is this She-Hulk. And if we're being honest, this character of She-Hulk isn't really that great, especially compared to the comics and the Hulk 90s series. She's so much better. And also, I would have really had no desire to see them rescue a superhero fashion designer from a villain who calls himself Leapfrog. That was not in my radar for like deep desires. It's not one of those things that I didn't know I wanted because I did know I did not want it. Yeah, they just could have picked a way better storyline than them just teaming up to fight this rich, spoiled brat of a villain who's, not even formidable, doesn't even fight him, just jumps out a window and breaks his legs. Their first discussion as well, Jen and Daredevil's, I didn't like the part where he was like, "I'm Daredevil." Like when she was like, "Well, you're like a superhero?" And he's like, "I'm Daredevil." They try to do the Star-Lord thing where like Star-Lord's like, "I'm Star-Lord, man, legendary outlaw." And it works for Star-Lord because Star-Lord is a comedic character. But for Daredevil, who's been previously established in the Daredevil series beforehand, him just saying, "I'm Daredevil," and expecting her to recognize him is a little like, really? Like, I don't think that's something that Charlie Cox Daredevil would do or say. Or act like. Also, tidbits of information about Daredevil. He does mention, like I said before, his office that he has in New York. And I believe he says "we." So I do wonder, because we're not still entirely sure if the actual Daredevil series is canon in the MCU. The Daredevil Born Again sounds like it's going to be more of a reboot rather than a season 4 of the original Daredevil series. But I have a feeling it's going to be more like what they call a soft reboot rather than an actual, like, we're revamping the character entirely. Because one, if they did revamp the character entirely, they would have gotten a different actor. Two, why in the world would you revamp the character entirely when you have such a great basis from the original series? So they likely won't do that, especially since they've established Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin in the MCU already, which we will see both Daredevil and Kingpin in Echo, the TV series coming out next year centering around the character called Echo from the Hawkeye series. So many series. Also, I wish they would have had a better reason for him coming to LA than just, I owed Luke Jacobson a favor for making me some suits. Like, I was expecting him to be in LA because he was like, it's kind of one of those Batman things where like Bruce Wayne has to go abroad because he actually has some business as Batman trying to like take down these bad guys in another country or another city. And so I was hoping it would be like that for Daredevil. Like, he would have some sort of business in LA because he was tracking down these gang members or this mafia or this supervillain, and like he would end up teaming up with She-Hulk to fight them. But no, he just is there because he's doing a favor for a friend and then ends up stumbling upon, Leapfrog kidnapping Luke Jacobson. Anyway, Jen and Daredevil drive to the lily pad, which is the name of Leapfrog's lair. And they have this whole argument about, like, Daredevil wants to do it the Daredevil way. He wants to go inside the warehouse and take each guy down. Jen keeps saying one by one, but Daredevil keeps saying her math is wrong. And for Daredevil, it is always more like group by group. Like, I'm going to take this group down, and I'm going to take this group down. In fact, just today, I watched the episode of season 2 where he has, like, the stairwell fight scene. That fight scene is awesome. And they did have a little bit of that in this episode where, like, he's hearing things and he has the senses going on the echolocation, as Jennifer Walters puts it, and he's taking down the guys. And I will say there was one moment that really upset me because he had them, like, a major moment where he was sensing all sorts of things and there was a bunch of guys coming at him. And I figured, I was like, can you at least let him have, like, you had that small fight scene just now, that's great, but can you at least have him this moment where he takes down a bunch of these dudes and then She-Hulk come in later? But then just She-Hulk came in, she said She-Hulk smash, and she smashed the roof and took all the guys out at once. And I really wish they would have just let him have that awesome fight scene in She-Hulk. And you know what? It may have not been as big of an issue if the entire rest of the She-Hulk show and the She-Hulk character were actually well written and good. Lots of sighs today, lots of sighs. It's like I want to say this episode was, good. But there are a lot of things in it that just annoy me. They do annoy me. Anyway, they infiltrate the warehouse, take all the guys down. Daredevil's fighting a bunch of dudes while She-Hulk's trying to explain to the idiot Leapfrog guy that if he quits on being a bad guy now, he might be able to appeal to the court that he had a temporary lapse in sanity. And then Daredevil starts ratting off, as he's fighting all these guys, he starts ratting off all this legal stuff. Well, he's like, he could say that he had PTSD and all this stuff. And then the Leapfrog guy, who has been established to be an absolute moron from hearing that, as any logical person would, when they heard it, he was like, oh, he's a lawyer. He's like, oh, so he's a lawyer. And then Daredevil says, oh, no, I'm not a lawyer, I just watched a lot of legal dramas. It's easier to slap my face when I take my hat off. Anyway, no, the Daredevil from the show would not have said something so blatantly obvious as to make people think, oh, he's a lawyer. No, that's not how this works. That's not how you do it. You have to be careful with stuff like that, and they weren't careful with this stuff like that. And we just had that stupid scene where even the idiot villain is like, oh, he's a lawyer. Daredevil would be so much more careful. Because he even says earlier in the episode, he's like, we need to be careful about exposing our identities as superheroes to protect the ones we care about. And now he's exposing his identity as a superhero, even though he still wants to protect the ones he cares about. Daredevil would not do that. He wouldn't just be sprouting off all this legal stuff like he knows it like the back of his hand, which he does, to make people think he's a lawyer. And I get it, it's not like he's flat out said, hey, my name's Matt Murdock. But still, I'm like, villains are resourceful, even though this guy's an idiot. You don't want that information getting around. Like, say, oh, maybe he's a lawyer, because then another guy might hear it, and another guy might hear it, and another guy might hear it. And then Kingpin might hear it. Or then somebody dangerous, MODOK, the leader, might hear it. Bottom line is, stupid idea. Not Daredevil. Anyway, Leapfrogs makes the stupid mistake of jumping out the window, and he breaks his legs. Thank goodness. Jen and Daredevil have a sit-down chat on the sign of the lily pad lair, and they're kind of having some banter back and forth about, like, oh, I helped you do this mission, and then she's like, no, I helped you do this mission. And I feel like that conversation was pretty balanced. Like, they didn't seem to be leaning too much to one side or the other. Like, they weren't trying to say that, oh, Jen is right and Daredevil's just an idiot. Like, they weren't going for that, which I did appreciate. In a general sense, yes, he does retain his intelligence in this show. They didn't make him a ton dumber just to make her look smart. I think there were moments with both of them where I was like, oh, that's a fair point. And then on her side, oh, that's a fair point. And then on her side, oh, that was cool. And then Daredevil was like, oh, that was cool. I feel like they were, for the most part, definitely some scenes here and there that are like, you might be kind of trying to make Daredevil look bad. But for the most part, they were balanced. The scenes where I thought that they may have been trying to make him look bad is when he's trying to explain to Jennifer that she shouldn't just go in there as She-Hulk because the guys have weapons. And I didn't know if they were trying to make Daredevil look bad for being overly cautious. And on one hand, it's like, okay, yes, She-Hulk would probably be invulnerable to most of the stuff they have in there. But at the same time, I can understand Daredevil's logic, because She-Hulk's not a superhero. At least yet. She's not a superhero yet. She's a lawyer. She hasn't barely done any superheroing. She fought some demons. She fought Titania twice. And she now is fighting frog henchmen, goon dudes. I did like the line where he was like, goons are guys who just do it for the money, and henchmen actually believe in the cause. I wasn't aware of that, and I've seen a lot of superhero cartoons and movies. I always just kind of think of henchmen and goons as the same thing as well. That could be a rule in comics that I was not aware of. Usually henchmen to me just were kind of in it for the money too, but he could be right. Anyway, that was one of the scenes that I was like, maybe they were trying something there. But moving on, we have this moment where they're talking on the sign, they're having some playful banter. Clearly this whole time Jen has been interested in him. Jen has been like, hey, this Daredevil guy, he's kind of good looking, and I'm kind of feeling that he's very attractive to her in both personality, character, all that stuff. And apparently he's attracted to her too, like we established before. And he's like, well, and what she asked him, when are you going to leave for New York? And he's like, well, tomorrow, but maybe next time I come back, do you want to grab some dinner? And we could have had her say, yeah, I'd like that. And then just show him leaving on the plane. Maybe having like one last moment where she's seeing him off at the airport. That would have been nice. Did we get that? No. You know what we got? Spending the night together. Again, these are why I have the sabers on the table. Jen literally says, yeah, we could do the dinner thing, or we could skip that and just go to the... And then they spend the night together at her house. It really does not doesn't put her in a good light. And that is like the main moment where I was like, that's not Daredevil. Daredevil would not do that. He would not just jump and say like, oh yeah, let's do this. And they did the same thing in the last episode between her and Josh. I don't like it when they treat that very intimate action as just frivolous, as just like, hey, let's just do that. No thought, that barely met each other. Let's just do it because it's fun. Wonderful. I hate it. I don't like it at all. And that's not Daredevil. In the first season of Daredevil, he does have this relationship with this woman because she had helped him previously, but because she helped him, the bad guys were after her. So he had to make sure she was safe, so she stayed at Daredevil's house. And then they have this, like, you know, meant to be like a joke little line where in the show where the girl's like, is this your idea of how to get a girl to move in with you? And he's like, well, it worked, didn't it? And it's just meant to be a joke line because it's purely out of necessity. Like, she has to stay there so she can be safe. And they don't even imply, at least not from what I saw, they don't even imply that they ever did that. They just have one kiss and that's it. He's not, like, chomping at the bits. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Like, why? Why would you make him and She-Hulk do that together? Like, I had heard that they might flirt with each other. Even that for me was like, really? You're gonna have them kind of have some kind of romance thing? No, they went all in. And then later they have this scene where he's literally walking out in broad daylight down the sidewalk or through the grass, through the neighborhood, Jin's neighborhood, carrying his shoes, with his shoes off, but it's still in his full Daredevil outfit. Because that's something he would do, because that makes sense. No! Sacrificing cool characters on the altar of comedy, or attempted comedy rather, is not okay! And another scary thing is that this is the second to last episode, and we still haven't gotten a reveal that Blonsky was faking. If he's not in the last episode, that probably means he wasn't faking. Which means they have changed his character from this awesome bad butt military guy who's also a monster in the Edward Norton Hulk movie into a meditation coach who's talking about his favorite chicken and making toilet kombucha in prison. That's a scary thought. That is a horrifying, mortifying thought. No, I refuse. I make like Tony Stark and refuse. Like when he didn't want to build a missile for the crazy 10 Rings guys. I refuse. This is Ethan Hunt. My team is dead. They're all dead. Moving on. You think that might be the end of the episode, but clearly it's not because they have to set up one big thing for the finale, or with the track record of this show, they might not even have done that, but thankfully they did, and it actually is pretty interesting. She ends up going to the gala. She gets an award for Best Female Lawyer of the Year with a bunch of other girls. And there's even a moment where the guy's like, what is it like being a female lawyer? Because Mallory Book got the same award, the lawyer from the previous episodes. And she's like, oh, well, it's twice the work, half the support, or something like that, and then people just telling you what's it like to be a female lawyer. I doubt that it's like that in law firms. I just have this feeling that a lot of guys are perfectly okay with female lawyers. Moving on, annoying. They get to She-Hulk, asking her about what it's like to be a female lawyer, and she's like, well, I want to dedicate this moment to my parents who were there. Remember Larry from Perfect Strangers and her mom. And also the creepy Todd Phelps guy is there, who's probably working with Intelligentsia. Hopefully it's not the leader. Not like the comic leader, but the leader of the Intelligentsia group. We do not need him to be that. Like, seriously. Samuel Stearns' villain title is the leader. So why would he not be the leader of this group? Intelligentsia. That is false. She-Hulk starts to talk, and she's cut off by the Intelligentsia guys projecting this video on the screen behind her saying that She-Hulk is not who you think she is, and she does not deserve to be praised. And apparently all that stuff that Josh was copying from her phone in the previous episode, at the end of episode 7, where I was like, what is he doing? I had no idea what he was copying or what that was meant to entail. Apparently that was meant to set up this moment because it shows a bunch of stuff that Jin has done on her phone. It shows a bunch of dating apps and like different guys. I don't exactly know how that's supposed to threaten her, but the next part definitely does. The intelligentsia guys essentially call She-Hulk, which I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys, up front and center. She kind of is. That's the sad part. That is the sad part, is she kind of is. And I wouldn't have said that if they didn't do the Daredevil thing in this episode. I wouldn't have said that. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we have this scene in episode 4 where she's just staring at the doctor guy the entire time, you know, getting him to leave his shirt off, staring at his muscles. After she gets done fighting the demon, she spends the night with him. Per her own accord, she just takes him into the bedroom. Then you have the dates she had with Josh in the last episode. There was only 3 dates at that point. And then we have the actual flat-out thing in this episode where she's literally, Daredevil makes the nice, pleasant suggestion, hey, why don't I take you out to dinner next time I come to LA? Nice, pleasant, respectful suggestion to build a relationship. But then she's like, no, let's just skip all that and then spend the night together. She kind of is, if we're all being honest. Or at least she has those aspirations. They call her that, and as soon as they did, I was like, they're not entirely wrong. You do not make a good guy character, woman, man, and have them be like that. What She-Hulk essentially is she is pre-cave Tony Stark. Her whole character throughout the whole season is pretty much pre-cave Tony Stark. There's some narcissism that he had. There was this constant need to spend the night with the opposite sex, which Tony definitely had. But he flipped. Maybe not the constant need for the opposite sex thing, but it's still that even was still kind of toned down after the cave thing. He flipped a lot of that stuff after the cave. He realized there was more important things than just having fun. He realized that there was such things as helping people and being responsible for the stuff you create. He had a character arc. He had growth. You see him as this narcissistic jerk by the beginning of the movie, and then he ends as, he still kind of retains some of his narcissism and his jerkness to some people, but at the end of the day, his heart has changed. He realizes that he can be a force for good, that he can help people. And She-Hulk, she's just been her, and she hasn't felt that Jennifer has any flaws. The only thing she's needed to grow through that they've established so far is, She-Hulk is more interesting than Jen is to a lot of people. She's more attractive than Jen is, and I just want, Jen just wants to be Jen, and she just wants to be all great by herself. No actual flaws on her character, on, her morals. And if they had just set that up more over time, maybe even just have the first 3 episodes be Hulk training. Her training with Banner. Him explaining to her, you gotta control your anger. You gotta do these things. And I will say, what they do in the end of this episode, Intelligentsia calls her. Then they play a video that apparently Josh recorded of them spending the night together. And she freaks out, because this is playing to everybody, and everybody sees it. The Intelligentsia is trying to prove their point by playing that video. They're trying to lie, even though it's not really a lie, to everybody. And then Nikki's like, don't do it, Jen. And She-Hulk just kind of looks, and then she loses her mind. She busts through the screen. The scaffolding comes down. She breaks through the wall to attack one of the Intelligentsia guys that she saw. They're all wearing masks. I don't know why she didn't just immediately rip the mask off when she got to him. But now she's standing outside the building with a bunch of different news cameras and the SWAT team guys aiming guns at her. She's holding the guy, and she's literally snarling like a beast, like a monster. This is the other guy that Bruce Banner had to deal with his whole life. Or his whole Hulk life. Ever since he got the gamma radiation. This is it. This is her out of control side. which I didn't think we would see. I thought at this point that they had just abandoned that plot line, that she was just going to be great just as her, but I was wrong. They actually have, I admit it, I was wrong. They actually had this moment, this major moment. And I think another thing I appreciated about it is that as soon as the video plays and she starts freaking out, they just let it be serious the rest of the episode. I mean, it's only like a minute, if that. But still, it does do more of a job. The no talking, the lack of attempted jokes does way more of a job of conveying the message of the story than all the stupid humor they've been trying to do this whole time. Yeah, because she freaks out. She loses her mind. She loses control, which they've alluded to happening sometimes in earlier episodes. And then I think one of my favorite moments, if not my favorite moment out of that whole thing, is the very ending, where she realizes what she's done. She realizes that she's lost her mind. And this is like I think was the best fourth wall break out of all the fourth wall breaks, because he just looks at the camera in this horrified face of despair, like, what have I done? Bruce was right. I do need to learn how to control my anger. I didn't have it. Like, I didn't get it before. And I hope that continues. I hope that's what they're trying to convey through this. They're trying to say that, oh man, I was wrong. And that Bruce really was right. Like, I need to learn how to control this. This is a problem. I need to be a hero, because she kind of learned that from Matt Murdock. It's like, I could be a hero and a lawyer at the same time. And now she's going through I can lose control. I am just as vulnerable as Bruce is to succumbing to his anger and succumbing to my anger now. Because she literally just becomes a monster, a snarling beast. Just like Hulk did before he got all Professor Hulkized and in control of himself. So yeah, she just has that moment where she looks at the camera and she's like, what have I done? Horrified face, but it's still kind of a fourth wall break because she is looking at the audience. Because she's kind of going to the audience is like, did you see, like, what did I just do? Like, that was terrible. And then end. And I was like, okay. That was a great way to end the episode. Just end it there. Just end on that horrified sense of dread, that sense of like, oh my gosh, everything just collapsed around me and this was supposed to be my day. And it's a good scene, probably the best out of the episode, which is unfortunate because it's the Daredevil episode, but the problem is it did not get the proper setup for this payoff. It had some setup that when this moment did pay off in a good way, but not the proper setup, not the best setup that they could have given by far. You could have set this up throughout the whole season. Her having these struggles of like I want to be a lawyer, but I'm keep facing these problems where I have to be a superhero throughout the whole season. Each episode. Like it's just snagging at her. Also, like, they could have added more moments where she was like, am I losing control? Am I not losing control? What's going on here? Like, that is an interesting idea for like the beginning of the series to be like, oh, well, I control my anger way better than you, Bruce. I'm the best at it. I'm great. Nothing bad is ever going to happen while I'm around. And then if that point is just completely flipped on its head, and she's proven completely wrong, they could have set that up way better. Because that's what I thought they were setting up from the beginning of the series. And then nothing after that entailed that same plot point anymore. It was just like, oh yeah, she's great. No problems here. But now that we actually get to this episode, we're back to episode 1. Bad setup. You had the beginning, you had the payoff, you kind of had the end, but you had no middle. There was barely a middle to work with, so you just did not get that satisfaction that could have been gotten from that ending scene of this episode because of all the mistakes made in the previous episodes. But yes, that is my rundown of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. We did get Matt Murdock, and he still retained a lot of his intelligence throughout this episode. He still was Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock for a large part, other than the spending the night, the I'm Daredevil scene. Also him earlier in the episode pointing out the fact that he can tell when somebody's lying, when he usually would just not say anything and just make his next statement based off that. I didn't get that either. But yes, few things that made him not Daredevil. Few things that, yeah, that is Daredevil. And some interesting stuff with the She-Hulk character at the end of this episode. The second to last episode of the season. So, holding out that they can at least hammer home a good finale, that the leader's going to be the bad guy, that she will finally realize that she needs to know how to control her anger, and she can be a superhero and a lawyer at the same time, like Matt Murdock. Hoping for some payoffs. You're close. We're close to at least finishing the season well. So, thank you guys for watching. Have a very blessed day. Please hit the bell for notifications. Please hit the subscribe button to subscribe. Like I said, have a very blessed day. May the Lord be with you. May the Force be with you. Goodbye. That's a wrap.